Hey guys, welcome to another SAPP coding tutorial. I'm Pranav, and today we're going to be learning how to make our own GUIs inside of Java. Now real quick before we start, I just want to make a quick note. There are two ways in Java that you can make a GUI. One is using the Swing libraries, and one is using the JavaFX libraries. I'm going to put a list down in the description below that kind of lists their differences, because they take a long time to list. But all you need to know mainly is that Swing is it's older, but it's also more developed and it's more used widely, it's more supported. But JavaFX, on the other hand, it's newer. It doesn't come with as many features, but it comes with a basic set, and it comes with definitely what most people would need in an application. But it also allows you to style things. It allows you to use CSS files to style the buttons and the menus and stuff. So for that reason, we're going to be using JavaFX. And obviously, if you want more clarity onto what the differences are, check the description below. It'll be there for you. Okay, so let's get started. This is usually the part of the video where I would say I'd kind of get into the code here, or I would do some kind of PowerPoint. But really, the reason why I'm starting here rather than a PowerPoint is because you'll see. I'll get to the PowerPoint in a bit. I'll get to the PowerPoints in the later tutorials because right now we're just setting it up, okay? Before we can even code anything, we need to set it up. Now, if you use Eclipse like me, then you're going to need to do quite a bit of setup. With JavaFX professionally, then I do suggest then use whatever IDE is most comfortable for you. But if you're just learning it, honestly, and you plan to make one app and that's it, or maybe you just want to dabble around in it, just learn how to make it, I definitely just recommend getting another IDE that supports it. And one great IDE that I know that supports it is Intellij. So this is my Intellij right here. And I set up some things beforehand, just a quick comment thingy. But yeah, so this is Intellij. And natively, it does support JavaFX. JavaFX comes installed within the JDK if you have a JDK 8. If you have a later JDK, I'll put the link in the description below. You do need to install something, apparently, from this website. That's not what they have it downloaded. I guess to save space or something. Not too sure why they would do that, but yeah. So for this thing, I'm going to be using the JDK 8. So that has JavaFX installed. And no matter what JavaFX version you're using, I don't think it'll matter too much because in the beginning it's all the same anyway. So let's get to it. I'm just gonna press space. So I made a class called main, and this is a normal Java class. So yeah, and I added a quick comment here. And so the reason this comment is here is because I kind of want to explain what each of these terms mean before we get started. Because you're going to see these terms get thrown around a lot, and if you're going to want to know anything, you're going to want to understand what they all mean. So when you think of a JavaFX application, like a GUI made through JavaFX, I want you to think of a play, like a stage play. Something, like a legit play with real actors and stuff, and backdrops, and a theater. Yeah, so basically, JavaFX uses these as actual terms. Well, not the components as much as these first three. I call them components. But we'll get down to that in a bit. So basically, the stage is kind of the stage. It's where the audience gets to see the actors perform. They get to watch as the scenes play throughout. They get to watch the play as the scenes play out. They get to watch all the actors, kind of act, I guess. It's a stage. Same thing in JavaFX. The stage is what the user sees. It's the window. This Intellij window, this is what would be considered a stage in JavaFX. Next is the scene. Now, plays are composed of scenes, right? Well, okay, they're composed of acts, but those are composed of scenes, right? Now, the scenes are essentially they're a different, okay, so in JavaFX, you're given a set of, a lot of things. For example, you're given buttons, text boxes, as I listed for the components. You're given lists, you can add your own stuff. So it's pretty intricate. It's nice. It's a pretty nice set of default stuff you can play around with. But obviously, Java it's not really dynamic, so you can't have those things really moving around. So what you do is instead you have preset scenes, kind of like how in a play, maybe one scene it's going to be outside in the night, so it's going to be a starry sky, and the next scene is going to be inside a house, maybe. So those are obviously going to be different, right? They're going to close the curtains, they're just going to move the backdrops a little, change the actors up, maybe add some chairs or something, and there you got a house. Same thing here. Basically, Java is going to do some stuff behind the scenes, and it's going to throw a new scene onto the stage if you call for it. So that's kind of how, for example, if you want to make a text box appear that maybe like they enter something and then you want to have that disappear, but then just have normal text display, like regarding their whatever they entered in the text box, you can do it that way. You can switch out the scenes. And yeah, we'll get onto that later. The layout is where all of your so basically, imagine you, okay, so let's talk about components first, because honestly, if I have to explain layouts, I'm going to use components. So the components are like your actors, per se. So for example, you're going to have like maybe in a Romeo or Juliet play, you're going to have like, you're going to have your Romeo, your Juliet, those actors. You might have like some other random background characters. You might have like some backdrops and stuff. You might have some like chairs, I guess, for some reason. I don't know, maybe a rope ladder, a vine ladder, I don't know. Like, you're going to have a bunch of random stuff, right? Those are the components. Those are what make the scene look like the scene. This is kind of what the user interacts with in the program. So like your buttons, your text boxes, your stuff they can read, like text areas, or maybe like, pretty much that's all the components. You can add a bunch of components. And the layout is where all of them go. Because if you have a bunch of components, they can't just be nowhere, right? You have to tell them how they should be arranged. Otherwise, they would all just kind of appear in the top left corner, and it'd be kind of weird. So in order to actually put these components somewhere, we need some kind of like set. For example, if you pour water just on a table, it's going to spill everywhere. But if you have like a box and you divide the box with like walls and you pour water in them, then they're going to divide into the ways you want, right? So in that same, concept, the layout works very similarly. Basically, you fit the components into a layout and it kind of, lays out the components in a nice kind of orderly fashion. And obviously there are many layouts you get to choose from, and we'll talk about them in the next tutorial probably. In this tutorial, we're only going to focus on one. So those are the main 4 terms that I want you guys to remember, though. Okay, so enough of that. If I'm sorry if I kind of zoomed through that, I'll try to just slow down a little. Honestly, I've done that part a couple times because I messed up. So okay, let's actually get to programming using JavaFX. So let's go ahead and make a main method, public static void main. And for the majority of this tutorial, I'm going to be using automatic imports. So if you're not using an IDE that also does automatic imports, sorry. For some reason, I think everyone uses an IDE these days anyway, so I think we're good. So basically, in JavaFX, the main method is practically just a dummy method. Like, it's not actually doing anything. It's just calling another method, really, because all the interactions are going to be done in a GUI, right? You don't need the main method. Well, you do, but I mean, basically what we need to do is we need to call a very special method. But before we call that method, we need to tell Java that this class is a JavaFX class. We need to tell it that this is a JavaFX program. And the way we do that is we extend a class. So let's say extends, and it's going to extend a class called application. And it's this first one. As you can see, we're importing it from JavaFX.application. So this import statement. And by doing that, we're telling the compiler and the runtime engine that when we run the program, we want them to keep in mind that this is a JavaFX file or a project, JavaFX project. Okay, now that we've done that, we have to go ahead and call another method inside the main method. And if we don't do that, our JavaFX program just won't work at all. It's called launch, and we need to pass in the arguments that we get from our main method. So we say launch args, and that takes care of that. And the final thing we need to do is we need to implement a method, because this has a method that must be implemented here. It's an abstract method called start, and we can do this by doing one of two things. One, we can click this implement methods button up there, or we can type it ourselves. I'm just going to click implement methods. So you're going to want to hit this start one. It should be the only one actually. So do that. You don't have to copy the Java doc. You can if you want, but I'm just going to only insert the override thing. Okay, and when you do that, voila, we've got our method. All the code that we're going to be doing, at least in this tutorial, is going to go in the start method. We'll make additional things for pop-up windows and stuff, but for now, everything that we code will be inside the start method. As you can see, when we did that, it automatically imported this stage class, and we're using that. And this is kind of like where the user sees their content. And before we do anything, we need to call a method on it. Primary stage, because that's the name of the stage, .show. And that might seem a little weird. You're like, what are we doing here? Basically, by default, when you run the program, the primary stage is hidden from the user. They won't be able to see it. And that defeats the whole purpose, right? We want them to interact and like kind of see the GUI. So first thing we need to do is tell it to show. But that's the last thing we want it to do. So I just want to get that out of the way because I know I'm going to forget it later. So if you want, you can put it now. Or if you're confident that you'll remember it at the end of the tutorial, you can throw it in at the end too. But all the code that you want to do for this primary stage, configuring it, you want to do it above. So we're just going to kind of throw this together like an assembly line. We're just going to put together the various pieces. So we're going to make our scene, we're going to make our layout, and we're going to make our components. And I'm actually going to make this in the order of components, layout, scene, and then stage. So I'm going to do it all like this. And the reason I'm doing it like that is because each one of these kind of depends on the previous. So the stage can't function without a scene. The scene can't, I mean it can, but it won't work. The scene cannot function without a layout. It just won't work. The layout will not function really properly without components because, you know, then what will they click? And the components are just components. So let's actually make some components. So I'm going to only make one component today, and that's the button. And there's two buttons, one from the AWT package and one from the scene control package. You want to import the scene control one. You know, chances are if it's from the JavaFX kind of library, then chances are that's what you're looking for. Now, just for this tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and name all the components and all the scenes and everything, all the variables. I'm going to name them their class, or what they would be in a GUI, just because I kind of want you guys to get the meaning. So I'm just going to name the button button. If you're actually making a real program, I would not name this button. And so inside the constructor parameter, we can specify what we want, what text we want on the button. So if you have a button, that's okay. Well, like chances are you want it to say something, right? Like if it's a submit button, maybe the word submit or something like that. So I'm just gonna say click me, and as you can see, Intellij is telling me that this is the text variable, whatever they have there. And you can also, if you don't want to do it that way, you can also call the set text method, and this will also this will accomplish the same thing. I can say click me here, and it'll set the text equal to click me. But obviously, I kind of like it. Well, not obviously, but I like it. I like this form. It's more compact. Okay, well, and if you want to add any more components, add them here. Add more components if you want. Okay, next, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create our layout. So, unlike the button, we can't say layout equals new layout. We're going to get a bunch of things related to the layout, but nothing is actually layout. It's not a layout. So we're going to talk, I'm going to explain more about this in the next tutorial when we talk about layouts, but the one I want you guys to use right now is the stack pane layout. And all you need to know for this one is this kind of spaces everything out evenly and in a nice kind of window-like way, kind of like a pane, a window pane. Think of it like that. And I'm going to name it layout for the sake of the tutorial. This does not take in any parameters for our sake, or for our purposes. You really only need one layout. You can have multiple if you use multiple for different scenes, but we're only going to use one scene for now. And we're just going to name that. We can... So, whoops, I don't know what I was doing there. So, a scene, you can it's just a class. You can build the scene object. I'm going to call it scene. And we're going to set it equal to a new scene. And this constructor takes in a layout. And we're also just going to throw in some dimensions. A width and a width and a length. Sorry, I keep saying width and height, but it's width and length. So, for the width, I think we're going to make it 300, and height can be 500. As you can see, it says width and... Oh, it is width and height. Okay, I don't know why I was saying width and length then. I don't know. Okay, I'm confusing myself today. 3, 2, 1, go! Okay, and then finally, the last thing we need to do is we need to... Oh, okay, second to last thing, because I forgot to do a step. We need to call Primarystage.setScene, because right now the scene is independent. It has nothing to do with the stage right now, so we need to tell the stage to take this scene and make it its own. So we're just going to pass in the scene through there, and that's what setScene does. It just sets its scene equal to this. And then, technically, this should work all fine. Except it won't, because there's one key thing we forgot to do. Earlier, I said a layout is kind of where you can fit all your components, but by default, it does not do this. We need to tell the layout what components we want to add to it, because if it just automatically added everything to it by itself, we could have multiple components, but maybe we want them to be arranged differently. So we want some different layouts for each one. And that means that, you know, sometimes we don't want other, like for example, let's say I had a button and I want it to be on, and I have two layouts and two scenes. I want the button to be in both scenes, but I have a text box that I only want to be in scene 1, and I have a text area that I want to be seen and only seen to. Then I don't want the layouts for the respective scenes to, kind of add the components automatically, right? I want to specify which components go to which layout. Well, yeah, because of that reason, JavaFX kind of just tells you to do it yourself. So we have to call the layout method, or the layout.add method. Okay, you know what? 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so before we do this real quick, there's actually one key thing that I kind of blipped over for some reason. I didn't really forget it, I just kind of blipped over it for some reason. Basically, we have this button, but it's sitting idly. It's not going anywhere. So we're adding an empty layout to the scene, and we're adding the scene to the stage, but we never added this button to the empty layout. That's why it's an empty layout. So stick with me here, because this command is this method is a little weird, but you have to call a method on the layout object, and it's this really first one called the getChildren method, and it's going to return you a list of children, I guess. And I guess you can think of the children as the components on the layout. And basically, we're gonna get the children list, and we're just gonna add this node. And it says node E right here, node E. All that means is we're adding a component. They're called nodes, I guess, but I think components flow better, so I'm gonna say components. So we can just take this button object and throw it in there. And if you have multiple, then you can call this method called add all. And then you can add multiple objects at once. But since I only have the button one, I'm only going to add one. So I only need to add. And this should create our UI. Now, keep in mind that this will do absolutely nothing. We're just creating a button. We're adding it to a layout, which then we're adding to a scene, and then we're adding that to the stage. Okay, so as you can see, we have this app here. Kind of looks like a phone app. But there's a couple things wrong with this. One, the size I specified does not matter. So, yeah, so let's resume the video. So, as you can see right now, I can literally size this text box, or this window, any way I want, which some people might want, but sometimes you don't want it to be like that. Sometimes you want it to stay a fixed size, because if you're going to add your own custom graphics, like a video game, and you don't want them to be able to see, like, let's say there's like, you made the game so it works on 13-inch screens. Like, I have a 13-inch laptop, so it fits a 13-inch screen. But then someone plays on a 26-inch monitor. They're going to be able to see more of your game. And that doesn't seem like too much of a problem, but if you didn't code it to accommodate for a 26-inch monitor, then it's going to break. They're going to be able to see things that you don't want them to see, like maybe outside the map a lot, and only 13 inches of their screen will be gameplay. So obviously that's not good. So sometimes you don't want it to be a full, like, you don't want it to be resizable. So we can change that. Actually, you know what? That's pretty simple, so I'll tell you how to do it now. And obviously we can click this button. It won't do anything though. But yeah, we can tell our GUI works now. So we made our first GUI. And just for the sake of sanity, what I'm going to do is I'll tell you guys how to make it so you can't resize it. So what we want is we want to make them so they can't resize the stage, right? Because the window. We want the window to stay fixed. So what you want to do is you want to say primary stage, and there's a boolean called resizable in the stage class. And that just determines whether or not you can resize it, right? Pretty self-explanatory. So we can call this method set resizable, and we can just tell it false. And this way, when we run it, and we try to resize the GUI, you'll realize that it'll stay in its weird phone shape. See? It's a weird phone thing now, so I can't change it. As you can see, the arrows that are there for resizing completely disappeared. I cannot go ahead and do it. It's gone. So it's forever this phone-looking thing. And I can click that button still, and nothing will happen. Okay, so that's it for this tutorial. So congratulations on successfully creating your very first GUI in JavaFX. Mess around with it, see what else you can, maybe add a bunch of buttons, add some other stuff. I guess you won't be able to add anything. I mean, unless if you're following the tutorial series, I'll teach you guys about button actions, like so you can actually make your button do stuff. And I'll also teach you guys about text areas, text fields, and whatnot, because next episode is going to be about components and layouts. So I'll teach you guys all that then. So I will see you guys in the next video. Just a quick recap. First, we talked about kind of all the terminology related to JavaFX. We also talked about how extending the application, because this is what tells Java that you're making a JavaFX program here. We talked about how you need to call this method here, because if you don't, it won't work. We talked about this start method, which kind of houses all of our UI code. We talked about how to make a simple button with some text on it. And I forgot to show you guys, but yeah, it does have it. If you look, it does have the click me text, right? So yeah, that's good. We talked about layouts, and especially we talked about this stack pane layout. Then we talked about how to add components that are nodes to the layout using this layout.getChildren.add and then whatever component here. We also talked about the add all one, in which you can add multiple nodes at once, or multiple components at once. You can list them, like I can say button, and then I can say button again if I wanted to, because that is legal code. But obviously, I don't want to do that, so we're just gonna ignore that for now. We also told you guys how to make a scene, and I did specify a height and a width, but those are optional. You can actually just throw in a layout and it'll be fine. But I like to add the width and the height, just so we know what we're dealing with here. And yeah, then after that, we told you guys how to show the primary stage, set the scene, and determine whether or not it can be resizable. And if you want, you can also set the size to the primary stage. No, I guess not. You can set like here you can say max height, max width, and you can even set a title if you want. Like if I want, I can say my app. And when I rerun the program, you'll see that I actually get a title at the very top. That's it. Like here it'll say GUI app.main.java. Here it says my app. So yeah, that's how you guys build your that's your very first GUI using JavaFX. At least I'm pretty sure. And yeah. So if you have any questions regarding what I covered in this video, then feel free to comment in the comment section below, or email us with the email below. And if you want, you can also refer to our website for challenges regarding any of the topics you see in our videos. So if you go there and check out the challenge for this video's title number, then you will see a JavaFX challenge.